Hello, and welcome to this episode of an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim, and with me, as always, we have Matt and Devin. And joining us as a special guest this week is Andrew from New Jersey. Andrew is a part of another podcast, which he'll talk about in a moment. But before we get into that, go over what today's topic is. We have a list from Johnny Test, and we're going to be going over good versus evil tournaments and talk about what we like, what we don't like, and how they end up going around. So, Andrew, if you want to give yourselves a little bit of a shout out and talk about what your podcast is about.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone, for having me. As you mentioned, I'm Andrew. I am a member of the There and Back Again, a Hobbyist Tale podcast with my buddies, John and Evan. We are kind of the New Jersey community. So we play in the northernmost part of New Jersey at a store called Mythico Studios, where John actually works now. So he's kind of poured his heart and soul into designing some really cool terrain features, and we try to mix up the events that we have there. And we have a lot of fun doing so. Our podcast, we each kind of have a different thing that we bring to the table. I'm a little bit more the analytical, mathematical player. Evan is like really a master craftsman. He does all these cool conversions. You guys should definitely check his Instagram out. Half Full Halfling, I think is his name. And John just does kind of a little bit of everything, and he's our fearless leader. So we haven't been able to record for a little bit as jobs have kind of not given us a lot of overlap time to record. But hopefully we'll get back to it one day. And we do still have our events at Mythico Studios that we were lucky enough for Tim to come out recently and play with us. And we have a really good time. And our focus is good versus evil, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about later on.
I was just going to say, I'm really looking forward to going down to one of those tournaments. I know he keeps threatening to do it, and life kind of keeps getting in the way, but sooner or later I'm going to get down there. It's not, it's a 4-hour drive, so it's not that long a drive. So, it's definitely doable for a day. We'll be down there.
I definitely recommend it if you're looking because what's interesting about it as well is not just the good versus evil, but you guys do lower points than normal. And for somebody, if you don't have enough models, or if you just want a little bit of a change of the meta, you can go ahead and do, what is it usually 600 and 650 is usually the points limits you guys do?
That's typically kind of the high end of what we would do. We did a 450 event recently. We're trying to, mix it up and build a player base at the lower points and then kind of bump it up at some point, but also keep it manageable for just day-long events.
Yeah, just for anyone who's never perspective on the the American meta, we generally do like 700 plus across the United States. So 650, though common in like the UK, around here, that's definitely lower. 600, stuff like that is a little lower. So
yeah, if you want to change in something. And then also it's a very friendly group. I've only been to one tournament, definitely plan on coming back. But when I was there, everybody was very nice. Everybody looked like they had a really good time. The terrain was great as well. It's a very good experience. I recommend if anybody's near Warwick to definitely head over there. Or no, Mawa, sorry. But we're going to go into the list for today. As I said earlier, it's by Johnny Test. So Andrew, if you want to go ahead and go over that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we have a 1,000 point Minas Tirith list getting ready for Warhammer World. So that's pretty exciting. Johnny says he wants to take 4 bolt throwers for fun, but please critique the list in its entirety. So we've got that caveat going into it. I'm also a big Avenger bolt thrower fan, so I might be a little higher on this list than you guys. Not sure 4 is the right number, but we'll see. So Warband 1, we've got 15 units. So it's Boromir, Captain of the White Tower with the banner, horse, and shield, which I think is the way you want to run him. You've got 6 Guards of the Fountain Court with shield, 6 Warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 3 Knights of Minas Tirith with shield. The second warband is Ingold with 6 Warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 5 Warriors with shield and spear, and 1 Guard of the Fountain Court with shield. Then warband 3 is Madril, who's got 4 Rangers of Gondor with spears and 6 Rangers of Gondor without spears. So that's kind of his archer warband, it looks like. Then the 4 Avenger bolt throwers make up warbands 4 through 7. And then warband 8 is Denethor, who would be the leader of the army with 4 warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 4 warriors with shield and spear, and 2 rangers of Gondor with spear. So all in all, it comes out to 1,000 points, 63 models, great point of 31, and 12 bows. And it looks like Boromir's got 6 might. Ingold and Madril both have 3 each, I think. So that'd be 12. And then I think you get 1 on each siege captain, right? So I think that would be 16 might in this list, if I'm not mistaken. So the first thing I'm going to say right off the bat is this is about twice the size of what I usually play. So these numbers and the amount of guys that are in this list is just like staggering to me. But my first takeaway, there's a couple things that really stand out to me before I talk about the Avenger bolt thrower.
I was going to say, you mean aside from the 4 Avenger bolt throwers?
But that's like too obvious. So you've got to get into the subtleties, I think, first. So a couple of things that stand out to me right off the bat, which are actually things I've learned a lot from watching and listening to you guys, is kind of your distribution of your warbands here. So I did the same thing kind of when I started out playing, where I put all my archers with my archer hero, which is Madril in this case, and then just kind of put all the infantry guys with your infantry leaders. And there are some reasons why you might want to do that. For example, I play Lake Town a lot, and Percy gives your archers a bonus. So in this case, Madril doesn't actually give your archers any real bonus. So clearly your strategy here is to kind of sit back and shoot with all of the bolt throwers. But I would say you probably want to distribute these warbands a little bit better. So for example, the first one with Boromir, all of your foot troops, which are 12, you've got 6 guys with shield, and then obviously the guards of the Fountain Court that can support, but they got the defense 7, so sometimes you want them in the front rank. So maybe putting a couple of the Rangers with spear in that warband, you might be able to get some more fight 4, and then put some more of the guards of the Fountain Court in maybe Madril's warband so that it's not super squishy. I know he does give you the bonus for the reserve deployment, the Maelstrom of Battle, but if Madril's warband with the defense 4 Rangers does get kind of caught out in a bad spot, I mean, it's just going to be really easy pickings, and then you lose a lot of your shooting troops. So I would say maybe moving around some of the guys a little bit. You've got the banner with Boromir, which is awesome. And then, I don't want to say don't take 4 Avenger bolt throwers because it says clearly that that's what you want to do. But I'll just talk about my experience with them. So I've run lists with either 1 or 2 of them in them. You guys, I think, talked not long ago on one of your episodes about kind of how mathematically they're not really the best use of points. And while I agree with that, I found that every time I play them, my opponent just plays completely differently. And for a 50-point unit, you get the 1 point of might. You've got 3 models there that are a little bit hard to get to, and it is still a really high strength bow. So there are going to be times where you can take a guy off their horse pretty easily, or just threaten a pretty large area of the map. So I am a fan of them. I think, with the new missions in this edition of the game, and the fact that some of your deployment zones are really close to your opponent, I would be kind of afraid to have so much devoted to shooting with these siege weapons. So those are kind of my initial thoughts, but I'll take a pause and see kind of what everybody else thinks.
All right. So I just take a stab at it. So one of the things actually I would do with this list is I think the best use of the Rangers of the North, the Rangers of Athelion in this list is actually to distribute fight 4 across the army. You already have 4 bolt throwers, which I agree with Andrew. The psychological factor of 4 of those, most opponents, even if they could outwin you in a shooting war, are probably going to come to you anyway, especially if they're inexperienced with dealing with these things. And you'll still have the rest of your archers, but yeah, definitely don't want a shooting warband. And I think if you were to take like 5 warriors of Minas Tirith from Ingold's warband and plop them in drills, and then take his rangers and throw them upward. And of course, every ranger would need a spear to do this. And if you distribute some to Denethor's warband and, vice versa, mix it up, and even it out as much as you can. Boromir's the only one that doesn't really need to do this, given that he has guarded Fountain Court, as is what I'm assuming is a front line, since they don't have spears. Actually, you know what? The warriors of Minas Tirith don't have spears either. You might want to give the guards are spear armed.
The guards
the guards have spears.
Yeah.
He's got it organized, so he's got spears and
So he has those in the back, which so that's another change I might make. I might add spears to the Warriors minutes here. And the only reason is because Guards of the Fountain Court, more so than just the defense 7, is also they're fearless. So I kind of would be really tempted to like have the option to put them in the front ranks, which in this setup you don't have the option to do, because then your back Warriors are just waiting their turn to fight. So I would definitely give those Warriors units here spears if possible. Where you would get the points out of here, considering your heroes are already lower tier, just to cram all. Well, I mean, you get the points from an Avenger Bolt Thrower, to be honest, probably, but trying to look at where else you would grab those. I might think about that once I pass it off and come back to it. But those are my initial thoughts. Is I think you're really missing the primary benefit of the Rangers, which is, you know, beyond just the bows, is to distribute that fight for. Other than that, sure, we'll keep the Avenger Bolt Throwers. I mean, one of the ways you can get the points back is just to delete a Guard in the Fountain Court in Ingold's Warband, you know, or something like that. And that's like 11 points right there that you can just distribute spears and such. So that's an option for you. It would only bring you down one model, so no big deal there. Other than that, though, those are my initial thoughts of how I would replay this out. I mean, Matt, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, my initial thought when I looked at this was that I was going to say what Andrew wasn't going to say, which is this is too many Avenger Bolt Throwers. And it probably is too many Avenger Bolt Throwers. But then I started to think about it.
You want more of them, Matt?
No, I don't think I want more of them. I mean, my question is, you know, how viable this is at 1,000 points with 4 Avenger Bolt Throwers.
His heroes are too weak.
I was wondering if you could do it, you know, because the advantage of, so the thing about having one Avenger Bolt Thrower is one Avenger Bolt Thrower has the effect of shooing people away from its field of fire. When you have 4, you know, you don't want to distribute these, by the way, like a Napoleonic Grand Battery where they're deployed like hub to hub, where they're all shooting in one direction. You want like one, you know, somewhere near the left edge of the board, another one somewhere near the left center, another one near the right center, another one kind of near to the right edge of the board. So they have no dead zones and they all kind of cover each other with fire. So that, you know, if he sends a task force to try and kill an Avenger Bolt Thrower, at least 2 other ones have shots on that task force as they're approaching it. And I wonder if the way to fight this is to kind of reorganize the warbands along the lines of what Devin was saying, so that instead of having 3 kind of shield wally warbands and 1 ranger warband, to have 4 mixed shield wally ranger warbands, and basically one kind of sits in the vicinity of each Avenger Bolt Thrower. Obviously you put, you know, kind of Boromir in the center and probably Ingold kind of next to him, but still kind of near the bolt throwers, maybe with a bolt throw on either side, so that each one of these bolt throwers kind of has an escort. And it's, yeah, basically you have 4 independent forces, each with a bolt thrower that can kind of cover the others. And, you know, he has to send a significant amount of force after any particular bolt thrower to try and get at it, at which point that one bolt thrower like picks up its bolt thrower and runs away while the other 3 shoot it, whatever is trying to run it down. I'm wondering if that's the way you play it. And, you know, you are going to get some scenarios like Contest of Champions where you're going to be fighting in the middle of the board and all these Avenger Bolt Throwers are going to be at the back. And I wonder if you just kind of put your guys in a glob in the middle, wait for him to try and surround your glob, and then just shoot all the spearmen off of the surrounded glob. You know, basically, so you create like kind of a hollow ball in the middle with your guys with shields and spears, wait for him to try and surround it, and then shoot people that are trying to surround the thing. You know, this is kind of so far off of the baseline of anything even I've played with that I just don't know. I don't know how this works. I don't know if this could be a list of genius or not. I mean, I agree with all of Andrew and Devin's comments about kind of redistribution of the Rangers. Although if you want to be kind of like Ranger heavy in Madril's Warband, I think that's fine, because usually one of the reasons you want to split up your Rangers, other than getting the 5-4, which is useful, is to make sure you've got shooting from a bunch of different directions, but you've got 4 Avenger bolt throwers that are give you shooting from different directions. So that's less of a reason to do it. I think more of the reason to do it is to kind of maximize where your fight 4 is in these warbands. But there are certain warbands like Boromir's warband that I don't think he needs any archers, because he's got 6 guards of the Fountain Court sitting in there to do it. So you can maybe concentrate some Rangers someplace else, maybe stick them in some terrain. I guess one last piece of advice is I've gotten a lot of mileage out of my Avenger bolt throwers because they're so small, kind of putting them up on elevated terrain where they're hard to get to and have wider arcs of fire, because they can kind of shoot over stuff. And you've got 4 of them. So I would encourage you to do that as much as you can. So if you get those like Osgiliath terrain pieces that have that elevated thing, basically elevated platform at the top, and they're within 6 inches of the edge of the board, throw an Avenger bolt thrower there. I think that'd be a great place for it. All right. Those are my thoughts.
I think Devin really hit it on the key though. So if we take away the Avenger bolt thrower, it's an 800-point list. So this is an 800-point list. When you only have Boromir and he doesn't really have any protection like Lady of Light or another hero to help him out, I think that kind of really hurts it. So even something like upgrading maybe Ingold to Huron or something like that, just give Boromir a little bit more help, because I know Rainier would be happy with the total number of models, because he always likes to go heavy on the model count, and especially with the banner, you'd have a lot of fight 5 in the back as well, so you'd win a lot of fights in that regard. I think you need another hero to help Boromir out in the fights, and honestly, you might even need a 3rd hero because I think it's great that you have this many models, but I don't know that it's necessary to have this many models. I think you need to downgrade a little bit, and I get what you're doing with Denethor to make it so that Boromir can go in completely and do whatever he needs to do and not have to worry about this and that. But again, at 1,000 points, it's going to be difficult to keep him protected, because there's going to be a lot of big models out there that are going to be hunting for him. So that makes it a little bit interesting with Denethor as an aspect as well. What I want to ask you guys is, are you happy with Ingold included in this list, or would you change him to another model?
I'd probably change him. I actually was going to mention that thought, is the fact that Boromir's going to get shut down completely at 1,000 points. They'll be lucky not to run into something that can take him out, and that's it. That's all you've got that threatens, other than these, horde of troops, I guess. Which in itself,
and 4 Avenger bolt throwers.
So you do have the 4 Avenger, but I mean, any big hero can hide in combat to stop themselves from dealing with them. So,
yeah, although I mean, what's going to shut Boromir down is not going to be big heroes. It's going to be guys, wizards and ring wraiths running around.
I'm just thinking that they'll.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that one thing the 4 Avenger bolt throwers are going to do is kind of keep those pesky ring wraiths on Felbeast at bay.
I can definitely see that. I guess Boromir's kind of expected to do a lot here, and I guess Ingold. So as to Tim's point, I mean, I'm not. Okay, so first of all, I've never rarely seen Ingold ever since they FAQ'd him into Oblivion, right. But because now I guess from my understanding now he just always traps your guys and allows double strikes if you use his ability.
I don't think. No, I don't think that's.
I forgot what the complaint was with him.
Well, because by definition it says like he doesn't have to back up, but then I think there was the argument where if he couldn't back up, does that mean he's trapped or something like that? There's some variation on that, I think.
All right, so I think we at one point in the past we parsed out this particular language in the FAQ, included that it did not mean that Ingold's special rule traps everybody that he's near, but what it does do is it really prevents you from getting much other benefit other than keeping your battle lines nice and pretty because nobody has to back up. Because if you were still going to get trapped, you are still going to get trapped. So there isn't, other than kind of like organization on the battlefield, Ingle's special ability doesn't get you anything, which doesn't mean that he isn't a 3 might defense. I can't remember if he's defense 6 or defense 7, but I think he may be defense 7. Yeah, so he's a 3 might defense 7 guy who can strike.
I'd just rather have hero
isn't a
lapse. You
bad
can
thing.
do heroic defense and hold off someone that way.
Well, I think the guy you probably want for this list is Huron,
Yeah.
because you've got Denethor, so he's going to get the additional attack benefit when he's near Denethor. I mean, you'd have to sacrifice something to get him. You could sacrifice one Avenger Bolt Thrower and then upgrade Ingold to Huron and probably get some extra points to throw some more guys into Denethor's warband, which probably wouldn't be a bad thing.
So let me pose this question. I know he wanted an opinion on if he kept the 4 bolt throwers, but let's do a hypothetical in case we were going, okay, how do we make this so that you get Avenger bolt throwers, but also it makes it a better list? So let's say you took away 2 Avenger bolt throwers. What are you doing with those extra points? Are you dropping anybody else down to add stuff in? Like, are you maybe take away 100 points, you add Lady of Light, take away a few models? How would you improve this if you were allowed to take away 2 Avenger bolt throwers?
I think I would sorry. Call on somebody, Tim.
All right, I'll go to Devin first.
Oh, well, I just keep him in mind here. I think that was the main thing he didn't want taken out of his list. But
well, no, I'm saying we talked about we're talking about. He said he didn't want the 4 out, and I think we've given decent reasons of what to do or not to do based on having the 4. But I think if he was willing to, let's say, let go of 2 of them, up to 2, if you wanted to just take away 1, for example, what would you guys do to change it to make it better? But there has to be at least 2 bolt throwers in there.
So if you take out 2 bolt throwers with 100 points, I actually be very tempted to see if I could upgrade Ingold. Actually, out of curiosity, what's Emer Hill's point cost? 135 fully?
I think it's 155. I think it's 155 fully kitted.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to do that because then you'd still need to upgrade these Wordsman's Terathus troop type. So you probably won't get the glorious combo of. So I would probably. So you got to keep Denethor because he's clearly just someone to bulk out the troops. I'd keep Madrill just because, okay, I guess he wants to make sure that in Maelstrom battles he can get around his Avengers with minimal effort. So then, yeah, realistically, it'd be upgrading Ingold. If you did that and you only went as far as Huron, because other than that, I would take thinking Emerhill. I don't know if I'd take Forlong over Huron. I think I'd probably take Huron over Forlong. So realistically, yeah, I guess you would upgrade to Huron, which would cost you another 20 points. And then what you probably do from there is upgrade some of these Warriors of Minas Tirith to Fountain Court Guard from there, and just give yourself that ability to hold the line a lot better. Especially since at 1,000 points, you're going to be dealing with a lot of terror stuff, which is an argument for Forlong. But, well, no, because this is pure Gondor, so you get +1 courage everywhere.
You get +1 anyway.
Yeah. So,
and you got no shortage of
courage.
bodyguard guys that you can throw in.
Yeah, the Rangers are like courage 5 at this point. Oh no, they're courage 4. Yeah,
they're courage 4.
I mean that's pretty much my initial thought. Just because, I mean, other than that, you could, Emerhill, but I mean, Huron. That's my initial thought off the top of my head. What were you thinking, Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. I would just change Ingold to Huron, and there's still spaces left in this army, especially if you go from Ingold's Hero Fortitude to Huron's Hero of Valor. So I would just spend more points getting more troops.
Yeah.
In roughly the same ratio of Rangers of Gondor, guys with shields, they can stand in front, and then a handful of either Citadel guards or guards of the Fountain Court.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Bodyguards.
There's space in everyone's warband.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, I'm now counting. I'm like, oh wow.
Except for Boromir. Boromir is full,
Yeah.
but everybody else has space. So I think you just get more guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know what. I mean, you could also do this, by the way, if you just dropped one Avenger Bolt Thrower. That would be enough points to upgrade Ingold, Huron, and then get a few more guys. Probably keep your model count roughly the same as it was without the Avenger Bolt Thrower. And I guess one thing I will point out about the Avenger Bolt Thrower is because it is a good siege engine, its utility diminishes. There's a law of diminishing returns. Because the Avenger Bolt Thrower starts to be useless when the army lines come together, because then they tend to run out of targets. And the more Avenger Bolt Throwers you can, the more you have in your army, the more the amount of points you have that become useless when the two army lines clash. So if you're going to go with this number of Avenger Bolt Throwers, you need to kind of come up with a plan to keep them useful, which is why I was kind of thinking out loud about that. Put a hollow blob in the middle of the board, let him surround it, and use the Avenger Bolt Throwers to kind of pick off the spears around the outside. That's a way to kind of keep them relevant once the battle lines get together. Is make sure you get surrounded, basically, so you can give those Avenger Bolt Throwers that are behind your lines something to shoot at after the lines have come together.
Oh, and I want to clarify all this advice for me is trying to keep it pure faction. That's my assumption. So for those of you out there screaming, why not Lady of Light? That's why we didn't pick that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm also trying to stay away from the fiefdoms, because that starts to change it into a very different list.
Okay. Thank you for your list, Johnny. Let us know if you make any changes, or if you take any of what we said into consideration, and let us know how you do at the tournament. Post that in the comments as well after the tournament happens.
I think he's going to throw a skull. So actually, how well he does is how friendly and cool he is.
Oh, I guess one point that rarely comes up, but will come up with this list, is doesn't he need to keep 4 Minas Tirith heroes in this list so he can get the 4 bolt throwers?
Yeah, that's true too. You need 1 per
siege engine.
Yep. So you'd have to do her, and you couldn't even go for long.
Yeah, you couldn't go for long.
Okay.
So it's probably not the better option to do anyway. So
yeah.
We're going to move into the main topic for today, which is speaking about good versus evil in tournaments. So
just to be clear, Tim, are we talking about good tournaments versus evil tournaments? Are we talking about being good versus being evil in tournaments? Or are we talking about good versus evil tournaments? Just so I'm clear.
I think we pick out of a hat, and then whatever number we go with that one. So if
I prefer
2, we go with that.
Person in tournaments.
I think your response after channeling Bilbo in response to my Gandalf is to say, well, I guess all of those.
almost came up with that.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting though, right? Being good in a tournament, being versus being evil.
Is it good to be a scumbag in tournaments?
what do you get out of being good in a tournament versus being evil in a tournament?
Yeah. Or is this a good tournament, or is this an evil
tournament? So there's 3 episodes right there.
Yep.
Andrew, if you want to go over what are some of the things you've enjoyed about being a part of the community that has mostly good versus evil, anything you like, anything you dislike, a quick little summary of what you enjoy about good versus evil or what you hate.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off with kind of how we came to be mostly good versus evil, and now basically exclusively good versus evil store, which is the first probably 6 events I went to. We had probably 80% good armies and 20% evil armies, and we just told people to bring one. And the organizers, so myself, John, and Evan, always wound up having to play evil. So we're like, we painted up all these good armies because we tried to keep it good versus evil, right? So we're thinking, we painted up all these good armies, we're never going to get to use them. Like, what can we do about this? That was kind of the start of it. And we also I think just generally from a thematic perspective, we like the good versus evil concept. I think having evil armies versus evil armies, we had no issue with that. We thought those were really fun. But just like trying to grow the community in our store, seeing people, come in and watch games of fiefdoms versus like the Great Company, we just felt like it maybe wasn't the best for the branding of Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game at our store, because we're definitely not an exclusively competitive scene. I mean, everybody plays for different reasons, but I'd say for the most part, to your point earlier, Tim, I mean, it's just a bunch of people kind of out to have fun, show off their newly painted armies, and compete. But it's not that's not kind of the sole focus. So we came up with the idea actually from watching your episode with, I think it was a gentleman from Germany who was talking about how they do the good versus evil events. So I kind of got started with the idea from that and tried to kind of run with it a little bit. So there's a couple of things we were worried about, right? What if you only have good or you only have evil? Are you going to feel like not included and that you can't participate? So we came up with, we use basically the same rule that they have, which is you roll off at the beginning of the round. If you win the roll off, you can decide good versus evil. You tell your opponent basically what your two lists are beforehand. And if your opponent only has one, no matter who won the roll off, you get to pick if you play good versus evil. So there are instances where you could wind up having good versus good or evil versus evil. But one of the things I love most about it is I think the gameplay mechanic that Matt was just talking about with the bolt throwers, right? Like I really like that there's clear, unique abilities that evil factions have, shooting into combat, right? Denying heroic combats, like all of this tactical gameplay, that it makes the evil armies feel like more fun and more interesting and like they have more tricks. And then the good guys are just better fighters, better heroes, generally speaking. And we liked that theme. We liked that, kind of choice where you had to pick which of those you wanted to bring. And depending on the scenario, determine kind of what list you wanted to bring. So I'd say those are the things that we generally like about it. From a competitive perspective, I think there's definitely some units that go way up in value when you're playing good versus evil. And we can talk about that maybe a little bit later. And also, vice versa, right? Some units and some armies that maybe aren't as competitive. I always talk about like elves are fight 5 for good side, right? The only way you're getting that on evil is with half trolls, which is not really a very commonly run list. So if you take elves on your good side, you're winning all the fights against the basic troops. There's no other option for evil. So that's kind of a con, right? Like you shouldn't be able to just take an army and know, if elves, for example, were going up against the list we just talked about, they have Barmir with the fight 4 going up to fight 5, and now you're even, and they still have the Elven Blades, but there's a little bit less thinking that goes into playing lists like that. So those are some of the negatives where there's clearly more favorable options and more favorable armies.
Okay. Is there anything through, how many tournaments would you say you've held now since making this a thing?
I would say probably in the neighborhood of 10 or so, maybe.
10 tournaments, okay. Is there anything you've learned that maybe you thought was a good idea that didn't end up working out, or something that you wish you could change a little bit about the format?
Is that specifically to good versus evil, or?
Yeah, so like, for example, maybe, so like, I'll give you an example. When I went to the tournament, I only had, at the time, because I wanted to get the painting points, I only had an evil army painted, so I only took evil. And so it forced people to play good lists when perhaps maybe they didn't want to. I think you've mentioned that now you're allowed to pick good or evil, but at the time, it was a rule that you had to play good. So I could plan my list to just play against good armies rather than having to worry about evil, if that makes sense. So that was a little bit of an advantage where if I wanted to try to, I didn't intend to abuse this rule. I just simply, that's what I had painted. I wanted to take that kind of a thing. But if I wanted to try and focus on that, maybe you could abuse that a little bit where you go, okay, I know I'm going against good. Let me put as much things as I can to deal with the good armies as possible. So I'm just wondering if there's anything else like that you've noticed, or if that was pretty much the only thing perhaps you saw.
Yeah, I think so far that was the big one, because I think, like I said earlier, for the most part, people just want to play their armies, right? So it'll be more of a rotating between good and evil. And, when I played against you at that event, I knew you were a strong player, so I picked my better army regardless of it happened to be good, but I picked the one I thought would be stronger. So yeah, that was an issue, kind of forcing people to play one army if somebody didn't have the opposite, that we kind of adjusted along the fly. But other than that, I mean, like I said, other than kind of the elf issue slash, just maybe, in my opinion, for example, like the evil armies, you're better off going as low fight as possible, because most good armies will probably outfight you unless you're playing maybe like Fight 4 Horde with Corsairs or Isengard. So I think that means that Goblin Town, that Moria, like lists that maybe aren't as popular, actually become a lot more competitive, because if you're going to sacrifice winning on fight value, why not go as low as possible, just spam out truth. So again, we haven't really had many of these issues because it's kind of a diverse player base who doesn't have every army in the game. They're playing with their kind of 2 to 5 armies that they have available to them, and adjusting on the fly to that. So we haven't seen that as an issue, but that's something I could kind of foresee, especially if we get kind of more competitive players coming down, that it could potentially be an issue in the future.
I liked how you mentioned how you did it to kind of grow the community as well. I thought it's a really cool idea that you did it specifically because it's a good point. If you're watching a game, you want to see Uruk-hai versus Rohan. You don't really want to see Rohan versus Minas Tirith necessarily, because it looks a lot cooler to see those two armies against each other. Do you believe if you had not done it, I guess, do you think your community would have grown as quickly, or do you think that it was just more like a coincidence that everybody just started to join?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually think it did kind of help grow the community a bit quicker, because there were people who had just one army. So I only have good or I only have evil, and they kind of got started on their second army as a result of making this change. And again, we didn't want to penalize anybody. So if you only had one, that was fine. But I think it inspired people. And now people are thinking, rather than, oh, what army am I going to bring to the next event? It's what 2 armies am I going to bring? And I think it just makes it doubly as exciting, and people want to tweak their lists just, ever so slightly, or maybe add a new ally in. So I have the same main force, but maybe, my Serpent Horde has Corsairs in it this time, and it's pure next time. And it adds for just a lot more kind of flexibility. And from a competitive and tactical perspective, you can go a lot of ways with 2 armies, right? You could have one that is going to win every single objective game, and then the other one be so aggressively slanted towards maybe assassination type missions or something like that. And then you hope you win the roll off, right? So you can get as aggressive with it or conservative with it as you want, which is something that I really like as a list builder. I really think a lot tactically about what my list will do well and poorly against. And I actually try to mitigate that with my other list as much as I can.
Have you had, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Matt.
I'm curious because you talked about how the evil players were starting to kind of play down with fight value, thinking, well, if I'm going to be, if I'm fight 2, it doesn't matter whether I'm hitting fight 4 or fight 5. Anything that's invested in anything more than fight 3 is wasted points. But I'm wondering if you're starting to see like a meta arise down there in the lists that you're seeing.
Yeah, I'd say from our regulars, they tend to kind of mix things up as much as possible. But I would say the meta is really like the big armies that you would expect, that everyone gets excited to paint and play. So a lot of Minas Tirith, a lot of Isengard, a lot of Mordor. Like most lists I go against when I'm playing good are Mordor, right? Like Tim came over and he brought Mordor and Serpent Horde Alliance. There's another guy that won a recent event who played like a pure Mordor list last time I played him. So I would say the main, and Isengard I think is by far the most popular list in our meta, one of the legions or pure or Dunland. So I think at our store they really get passionate about like the big moments from the films. So a lot of legendary legions. I think it really is kind of getting inspired from the lore and then taking that into an army and seeing how they can make the best version of that possible. So I'd say that's kind of the meta, is more like the big armies. And so me as kind of a tournament organizer, I am constantly working on like the lesser loved armies in the game and trying to make them as good as possible to show people like, hey, there's more to the game than just the core armies. So I've got like Farharad. I'm working on Numenor now. Just lists that we don't see as often. And I think I get a lot of times I put my models down, and not everybody, there's some like really competitive players, but I put my models down and they're like, what does the Watcher in the Water do? What does Elendil do? Like that stuff. And for me, it's more fun to just be like, hey, I'm opening you up to more aspects of the game kind of thing.
So it sounds to me, based on the way you're describing your community, is that they're all like kind of newer, 4 years or less kind of playing experience, I imagine. Am I wrong on that?
Well, so I am actually in that category. So I actually can't even answer that question. I just started basically when the new edition released and then COVID hit. So I've only been playing myself for about maybe a year and a half. I just kind of dove in. I connected with the guys at the store pretty quickly. I live close by. I was telling Matt earlier that Evan, who's one of the guys I run the events with, lives like down the street from me, just coincidentally. We didn't know each other before this. So I would say there are guys who have played since the very first edition, but do it more as just like a fun, like hobby kind of thing. And now they're getting into the like regular gaming more often. We have some guys from Rainier's group come up regularly. I'd say they're kind of the more competitive players that come to our events typically. And yeah, everything in between. But there's a lot of people that I've seen, like new faces just coming in, starting with Pelennor Fields, and I'm giving them tips on heroes to add and armies you can ally in. So a lot of those like kind of beginner armies, I'd say you're probably right there.
Because that's what, when you're saying like you have a saturation of Mordor and Isengard, generally it's an indication that you have a new community where like, because that's usually armies you start with, Gondor, Mordor, stuff like that. So you don't start seeing Farharad and stuff until people have really branched out because of how expensive they are, one, but two, like, it just isn't usually the armies you start with since they don't see them in the films. So, but no, it makes sense. So
I have to say, I'm a really big fan of the two armies aspect of it, because I know for myself personally, I always look at lists of what I want to take, and I always come down to two lists, and it's usually one good, one evil, actually, weirdly enough. And I think it's really cool that you can kind of, both as a beginner and as an expert, get to play the army you want because it's lower points, and still have a tactical decision to make on, because we always talk about this. When you have lower points, you really have to start deciding what's more worth it at that points. And so it really makes you think of, I want Boromir, but is he worth it at this many points, at let's say 500 points? Is he worth taking over, maybe someone like Huron and just adding more troops to that matter? So I really like that you guys do a good, because I know I always go back and forth because it's like, Lake Town or Mordor or Harad, that kind of a thing. So I think that's a really cool aspect about your tournament. Do you notice your community more growing in a competitive sense, or would you say it's more kind of casual players who just enjoy playing for fun and they're just going to kind of stay that way? Or do you think it's kind of rising in competitiveness?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would actually say it's probably mostly still on the casual side. I think most people are not kind of min-maxing their lists all the time. But I would say once they show up with whatever it is they've brought to the event, everyone's playing to win, so it's not like a whatever, let's just laugh and have a good time. Like, people are trying to do the best they can, but it's more like, hey, let me recreate this awesome scene from the movies or the lore that's not talked about. Had someone come with like an Earl the Young list recently, which I wouldn't consider the most competitive, but they did all these cool conversions and stuff. So I'd say that's kind of the foundation. But I do think having kind of some competitive players coming to our events, like I said, I think it tends to be, I consider myself on the more competitive side, and also like the Philadelphia group who's come out quite a bit. I think that helps a lot because it makes people kind of rethink their lists a bit. And as they see kind of the tactical maneuvers that some of these more advanced players are making, I really do think it's opening up kind of people's minds, and they're starting to develop more as players, which is nice.
Do you think that your community would like to keep it more friendly based, or do you think they'd be open to more competitive people getting there and raising the level of competition, would you say?
Let me just rephrase that question, Andrew. Do you think that your player base would like to keep relationships friendly, Or do you think that they would prefer to get more unfriendly?
Well, we are considering our evil tournament that we're going to run, where the tournament itself is evil. So it's a random
Extra
amount
points
of
if you knife your opponent in the back.
Yeah.
We send you the points amount an hour before the event, and it's a randomly generated number, so you don't know what to bring before you start driving. Just all kinds of ways to make it an evil tournament.
It sends you a text of what weapon to bring.
But I would say I think our group is always going to be kind of more on the fluff and fun side, generally speaking, right? Like I do think people are trying to improve their gameplay, but I will say I think as long as people come and they play competitively, if you're having a nice conversation with them and you're kind of going back and forth, it's still enjoyable for us. Alisher, who just won that huge event recently, frequently would come to our events and usually win because he's incredibly talented player. But so we all have stories about playing him and mostly losing, but it's not like deteriorated anybody's level of the gameplay. I think people actually enjoy it because it's almost like, oh, he's almost playing a different game than I am. I'm still trying to pick up on some of these tricks that he's doing. So I think it's a good balance that we have right now, but I do think it'll always kind of favor the more friendly, fun atmosphere and concentrating on the lore.
Okay. Was there anything in particular that you had on your mind that you were interested in speaking about the tournament, whether that be good versus evil tournaments or your tournaments in particular that just interest you about speaking about? Is there anything you had in your mind? That I know we talked earlier, you mentioned you bring them up later on in the episode. Is there anything you wanted to speak about specifically?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, obviously I know Tim came out to our event. Matt and Devin, have you guys ever done a strictly good versus evil style event before?
Funny you should ask. So that's a good segue for me to pitch Shadow in the East, which anybody who stays or follows the ASBGA or New England SBG Facebook pages will see. I just put the tournament pack up for her, but the last 3 years, well, we skipped a COVID year, but prior to that, the last couple events we've done have been narrative events, and basically it's billed as a narrative tournament, and so it is good versus evil, and basically you sign up to be on a team, and you're either on team good or you're on team evil, for each round, you and your teammates, there's some jockeying for position to see who's going to fight on which terrain board against which opponent. But you and your teammates are kind of trying to engineer the right team mix of, all right, so I want my, defense 8 dwarves to be fighting the rod bowfire, so they can just march into the bowfire and march at the other side, or maybe my elves are going to fight better on the Mirkwood board because there's a lot of terrain, and you try and figure that out. And you basically fight 5 or 6 rounds of everybody on this side against everybody on that side, and instead and the point of that tournament is not who's going to which individual is going to win, it's which team is going to win, and you try and engineer it so that you get a team victory. And there tends to be various other tricks and shenanigans going on. I think we talked about some of the earlier Shadow in the East that we've done, where one point, like somebody was playing a fellowship army, and the fellowship army was, for some reason unbeknownst to the evil player, was steadily kind of marching its way from the Shire board to the Mordor board, and it wasn't kind of until like the very last round that the evil players realized, oh crap, the ring is moving to Mordor, and maybe there's some significance to that. So we have some fun, and we do like different tricks each time. But anyway, if folks are interested in that type of good versus evil tournament, that's coming up again in February at Captain Con in Warwick, Rhode Island. All right, so that's my pitch for my tournament. But anyway, that's the good versus evil variant that at least I've done. And Devin, I don't know if you've ever put on a good versus evil one, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Not in recent times that you've been playing. There was a long period of time where I pretty much ran all the tournaments in like our area. So, which sounds absurd nowadays, but this is before like the Facebook groups. This is before, largely before most of these YouTube channels and stuff. So before, Hobbit even existed. So yes, in the past, a long past, but not anymore. No, I've actually pretty much retired myself into only running Nova. And that's all I run. So, which I refuse to make into a good versus evil tournament. So yeah, I guess not anymore. So
I have to say,
oh, go ahead, Tim.
I just want to make a further. If anybody's interested in Matt's tournament as well, I've been to all but one, which was the last one. I have to say, I was part of the stupid evil team who didn't figure out that the ring was going to Mordor. That was a mind blowing. When I tell you guys, let me be completely clear. It was me and like 8 other people. Not one of us had any clue what they were doing. None of
I
us.
was actually thoroughly shocked. I'm like, you had a fellowship player starting in the Shire and going directly to Mordor. Like I was just,
I've heard this story before.
Not one of us.
Yeah.
Not one.
I was like, how did they not? Like, you guys were like almost basically too late by the time you even thought about it.
We had zero clue whatsoever. No.
So focused on me. I was just like, all right, I guess I'll.
So for anyone who didn't know, if Matt, what did the good team get if they got the ring to Mordor? What was the reward?
So if the good, if the good team got the ring to Mordor, they won. What the evil team knew and the good team didn't know was if they succeeded in basically wiping out the Fellowship. Because the other thing about the Fellowship army is my son was playing it, and it was the Fellowship. So when he took losses, those losses were permanent. So the Fellowship was getting chipped away kind of as it went toward Mordor. And what the evil players were told was, look, if you kill Frodo with the ring, and you get the ring, then basically whoever does it gets Sauron, and like gets Sauron for the rest of the tournament.
There's another reason to hunt them down. So.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Believe me, we were just trying to think of who can get Sauron. Like that's why we were so that's why we didn't pick that. We were just so focused on, okay, somebody has to get Sauron in this tournament. Somebody has to find a way to get Sauron added to their list, because at that point it's pretty much over. Like Sauron with what was it, 800 points, Matt? Right?
Yeah, it was 800 points.
Sauron
so you get
with
800 points plus Sauron.
Yeah, I mean, you win at that point. So we were just so focused on that we forgot about. But if you're interested in, it's like Matt said, it's not competitive in the sense of individuals. It's a team competitiveness, which I actually think is a really refreshing take on the game. It's a lot of fun. Definitely come down if you're interested in that. It's like he said, it's good versus evil as well. Yeah. Very, very, very fun to play against.
And this year, by the way, just to let everybody know what kind of, well, one of the twists is going to be, there's going to be a variety of twists, but one of them is this is an escalation tournament. So you're responsible for bringing 5 different army list totals. And you don't need to, like, typically an escalation tournament, like you're going to be Mordor and you have like, I have the 400 point Mordor, the 600 point Mordor, the 800 point Mordor. I actually don't care what armies you bring as long as they're evil and they fit within the War of the Ring timeframe. So if you want to bring like a 400 point Moria and a 600 point Mordor and a 800 point Harad, more power to you. So if you want to bring a whole bunch of different armies and like kind of throw them on the table and see what happens, for this particular narrative event, that will work perfectly.
Okay. Do you have anything else, Andrew, that you wanted to speak about, or anything you had any questions about, anything like that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the guys here, especially since you guys have played a lot more competitive events than I have. Do your tactics, like just generally speaking, I know we could go into every single army, but do your tactics change when you know you have a good army and you're going up against evil, or vice versa? Some things that come to mind for me are like, targeting their courage mitigation. If an emo army has a shaman, that's like a very high priority for me if I'm playing my good force. Trying to break evil armies if I can get rid of their kind of stand fast and stuff like that. So I just wanted to see if there's anything that kind of stood out to you guys from your matchups of good versus evil that maybe changed the way you play the game a bit.
I think not in-game tactics so much, not off the top of my head, is list building. That's what will change pretty dramatically. There are certain units that I don't even bother bringing as much in good versus evil. I'm trying to think of some immediate examples, but I think half trolls come to mind because, as weird as it sounds, good has access to more terror than evil does. Well, in the sense that they can create like terror bubbles. So like half trolls are kind of weak to that. I don't deal with that as much going against evil armies. So little things like that, certain units sort of activate. I think I do try harder to get elves into the list if I'm dealing with good versus evil. It kind of, as you mentioned, they kind of like stack the fight values higher. So that's something that, will change. I think Lady of Light becomes a little bit more prominent because she's just such a hard counter to pretty much everything evil wants to throw out. So I think Lady of Light, that's another big change that gets thrown in. I'm trying to think of how I tailor my evil forces, but I mean, realistically, hero shutdown models. But I mean, like, how much does that really change? Too much. Trying to think of, Mac, when you go to like, Colorado and stuff, how do you think of it differently? Because I know for a fact I do in list building.
So I guess what I'm thinking about it is it depends kind of what I think the evil meta is going to do or going to be. Because I mean, there's basically three kind of evil metas, right? There's a magic-based meta where the army is centered around Sauron or some combination of ring wraiths. There's a terror-based meta where you're fighting either like Angmar or Black Numenorians, and then there's like a horde-based meta. Well, actually, I guess there's four. There's a horde-based meta, which is you're just fighting a lot of guys, and then there's kind of a subset of the horde-based meta, which is horde of shooting-based armies. And you kind of have to do some thinking about, because you can't really construct a good army that can counter all of those things. And I guess you got to do some prediction about what you're going to face and what you're going to go up against. Because the way you counter kind of the horde or the horde shooting type army is going to be different than if you're dealing with, the terror army or even the magic army. Which is actually a question I was going to kind of ask is, the evil armies that you're seeing down there, Andrew, which categories do they tend to fall into?
Yeah, so it's funny, and I actually wanted to ask Tim about this because I remember he mentioned when he reviewed the list on the podcast with you guys that he brought to our list that he had Lady of Light in mind. So I'd like to get his thoughts as well. But I think you pretty much see a ring wraith in most lists that you go against, whether it's someone playing Angmar or Mordor. That's like very common for us. So to Devin's point, right, you've got Lady of Light to protect your own guys, to banish, the ring wraiths. I would say that's the most common. And then I am the kind of horde of fight for Corsair or horde of shooting with the Betrayer and the Serpent Horde guy. So you've got a little bit of that as well. We don't have a ton of Goblin Town. We do have a couple guys who play that. So that mass spam, I would say we see less. So I think kind of that shooting spam is pretty common. And, the couple caster list is pretty common as well. But I remember Tim, when he came, he didn't bring any casters and he was trying to like make his list as like a counterplay to the assumption that people were taking Lady of Light, right, Tim?
So basically, yeah. So I thought at 650, with the fact that you wouldn't really see many Lady of Light, I didn't think that there was going to be almost any Lady of Lights, because I just thought at that point you have close to a 500-point list with the Lady of Light, and I wasn't sure that there would be that good of a list if it had Lady of Light plus 500 points, unless it was, let's say, Lake Town, like Matt always talks about, that 350 combo where you get like 36, 39 troops plus the 3 heroes. So I wasn't sure that would be there, but I was willing to take my risk that it wouldn't be there. And I figured to myself, if I didn't take any kind of big heroes and she was there, I wasn't going to see a compel or I'm sorry, on the good side, it's command and mobilize. Because if you're taking Lady of Light, who is obviously the most prevalent caster, it means you're not going to get another compel. So if you take Gandalf or Saruman or Radagast, like, yeah, you can compel me, but you're not really stopping my shooting. So I kind of took a lot of bows. And so I figured at that points level, if you're going to get one thing, I'm going to take advantage of the other. So if you bring Blinding Light with Lady of Light, well, she's not doing anything besides giving you Blinding Light and fighting. She's not going to stop my heroes because I didn't take any wraiths. And if you decide to take a regular wizard, which again, I didn't expect, because obviously if you took regular Galadriel, she's the cheapest. But even if you took Radagast, he's 150. So it's the same concept where you get a 500-point list around Radagast. And I just didn't see that happening. And then if you wanted Saruman or Gandalf, that's 170, 180. So I just didn't see wizards happening. So I was like, if I come against Lady of Light, I'm just going to fight straight up. And if I don't come up against Lady of Light, I'm probably not going to see a wizard. So it just made sense for me to try to take advantage of that whole situation. But,
yeah, that's. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Oh no, I was just going to say basically that was my thought process behind why I took the list that I did.
A lot of that though has less to do with good and evil versus more to do with the points that you were expecting to be.
Well, yeah, but that's basically why I thought, because I knew it was 650, and so I knew that Lady of Light was obviously prevalent, and if they weren't going to take her, they're probably not taking a wizard. So at that point, it's just a fighting match. So if I take heroes who are cost effective but do their job along with a lot of numbers, because I think I ended up having like 45 total models, I could take advantage of that situation. So I took.
No, what I'm saying is like I don't know how that would change much different if it was a good on good or evil on evil. Like I would once you've ruled out the main hard counters to the good versus evil meta, which is Lady of Light and stuff like that, then it just kind of becomes like I don't know. I'm trying to think.
I'm trying to understand what I'm just not.
Well, I don't know that you would have played much differently. Like if this said the tournament was not good versus evil at all, and you just went into there at 650, I'd be thinking still the same thing. Just now you also think, all right, Gulavar is not going to be there or whatever, possibly. Which honestly, I think some might fit him in. But what I'm saying is like, I don't know what would change. What would be different about?
So I'll give you an example. If I take good, and I know I'm going against evil, I know I can come up against a bunch of budget ringmates. I know I can come against the Witch King on Fellbeast. I know I can come against casters of that resort. When I knew that I'm playing evil and I'm only going to play good, because at the time, like I said, I only took one army because I just, like I said, I was lazy and I didn't feel like painting it. But I knew at that point I was only going to play good armies. So I knew that based on points, it wasn't as customizable as it is for evil. So it depends. If I took good, then I knew that I could come against magic at any time. If I take evil, then I know that there's only one model I really had to worry about.
Okay, got it. Because you got to select whether you wanted to play good or wanted to play evil.
Yeah. So by choosing to play as evil, I knew that there's one model I have to worry about. If I choose good, I have to worry about several models at different points variations.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Then, yeah, I don't know if you guys might agree with this one, but another one I often try to make sure I get in is R of Dismay. Evil armies.
I love War of Dismay.
I think our evil armies have a harder time dealing with terror than good armies do. Like, besides the Odd Fury, which now shamans aren't even as common anymore. No. But yeah, that's another thing that I usually try to fit in. So
I always try to fit in War of Dismay. Like if you can find a way to fit Lady of Light with Radagast or Lady of Light with Círdan, and then get a -1 to that as well. I mean, that is really not fun for the evil player, I'll be honest with you.
I mean, I will say I find that Lady of Light's impact on terror is less than it would otherwise be, because you end up with a lot of people who are starting their charges outside of her 6-inch zone, so they don't get penalized, because it's only 6 inches as opposed to the ring race 12. It's very easy for somebody. I mean, obviously, if you're a guy on foot and you're going to charge Galadriel, you're taking the -1. But if if what you're doing is trying to charge somebody who's 3 inches away from Galadriel, who's covered by Aura of Dismay or something like that, the odds are you're not going to be taking the -1 for that, because you're starting somewhere outside of her bubble and then charging into it.
Well, I mean, it depends. So I get what you're saying, but so for example, that first turn that you charge in, obviously you're probably just outside of the bubble, so it doesn't affect you at that point. But most of the time when we have the fights, they're an inch apart. And if you keep your army organized well enough, then you'll have that Aura of Dismay / Galadriel combo where they'll be close together. So anything that comes basically within 6 inches of Galadriel, they're going to be close together in lines anyway. So if you get Galadriel close to the front of the line, it's going to be affected anyway. Because, I mean, I'm not saying you want to charge Galadriel in at every single chance, but she can very easily kill troops at fight 6 with 3 attacks. So you keep her safe, but you definitely attack things with her. So I get what you're saying, though. I just think,
yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess that's my point is only people think that she's as effective as a ring wraith at preventing people from charging, and she's not, because that bubble is so much smaller.
Yes.
You can do weird stuff, like, especially if you have some sort of a higher mobility army, like some sort of cavalry based army or something like that, where, like, the first turn you charge from outside her bubble in, and then if you want to, then you can then take somebody who's like inside of her bubble and then charge. If you get priority, you charge further down the line at somebody who's outside of the Terra bubble, and you take somebody else who wasn't in her 6-inch bubble and charge in. You can do kind of things like that. But anyway, I mean, you're not wrong to say that she creates a synergy with Aura.
I actually agree with you for most of it. I think it's when you get to the really advanced parts where people know how to position things, that's where I think it starts to come into more of an advantage. I would say for probably 90% of the time you are correct in the fact that it doesn't matter that much. I think it's when someone finds a way to get that perfect bubble around themselves to, people are charging in, and maybe you're against a lesser opponent, that becomes more effective. Andrew, I wanted to ask, I know that you keep to lower points. As your community grows and your community starts to play more, do you think you would raise your points, or are you guys all really happy with the lower points because you can take more armies?
Yeah, I think the highest we've gone so far is 700. And I think just from listening to you guys and a lot of other people, it seems like 800 worldwide is kind of most people would agree, the most like ideal points level for a skill intensive match, right? Like you both get all of the units that you want for the most part. And it's really just kind of who plays better. So as kind of the math and analytics guy, I think more points just reduces variance, right? Like the lower points you have, you can get a lucky shot and kill a ring wraith, and that's a larger percentage of your opponent's army, for example, right? So I do think that 800 points is probably the ideal level to play at, which I think is what you guys probably are most used to. And I think we'll get there at some point. I think the desire for us to keep to 1-day events and not be another kind of weekend event might limit that a bit. So we might kind of try it and see how it works. But, we try to keep the rounds to, I'm not sure how long your rounds are typically, but, to like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And again, we have some guys who are on the newer side, so they're not, as quick to move their pieces around. So we're trying to find that balance. We don't want to make it so unreasonable that it can't be a day-long event. But I think people would be excited to play just totally different armies, right? Like Barad-dûr, you can't play Barad-dûr at 650, right? 800 still not ideal, but it opens up a lot of armies that people wouldn't otherwise play. So that's something we're looking forward to, and I think we'll get there. But for now, we're probably sticking in kind of the lower points range for a bit.
And I want to make sure, I'm not saying that, when are you guys going to join the rest of us kind of a thing. I was just trying to make the point of, is that something of interest, do you think, to your group, or is it that you're really happy with the lower points? I guess was the way I wanted to phrase that. Because I actually like that you guys have a very niche thing where you have lower points. I think it's good to have variety as a community of what to do and where to go. I just wasn't sure if you guys are, starting off as a group, we're at lower points because people need armies, and then we plan on growing up, or if you guys are just really happy with that kind of points level and that's where you're going to be, and then with the occasional higher game.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like, I do think we'll go up to some of the bigger games. We may even try 1,000 at one point. But I do think we'll be kind of in that more mid-range points level because we can get a few games in. People can get home. We've got some people that drive. Someone from Matt's group came down recently. We've got people that come from DC. Young Duke comes to a lot of our events, and he drives 4 or 5 hours, comes to the event for the full day, and drives 4 or 5 hours back home. So we want to keep it manageable, right? So that people can still do that. And I think bumping up to 800 or 1,000 for just a day-long event, either you've got to, cut people down on time and really make the game end and just go to victory points early, which we don't like to do. We like to let people play it out if we can, because again, it's more, friendly. So yeah, we're trying to strike that balance. I think we'll probably wind up still in the 650 range for most events. And then, like I said, we tried a lower points event recently. We'll probably try some higher ones just to see kind of what the community kind of latches onto, I think.
Okay. Do you have any final questions, Andrew, for us, or anything?
Just one more point on the good versus evil, which is, your shooting mitigation, right? The evil side only has the Shadow Lord. Like, that's the only thing that they can do to stop shooting. I know he can ally into a bunch of lists, but I just I had that in my notes as like the good side has all the blinding light characters, has Galadriel, obviously. So I try to, whenever I'm building a good list, at least get those 33% bows in every list that I run, just because I feel like you're going to have most of the time a couple rounds of free shots. So this will be good for our buddy with the 4 Avenger bolt throwers, I think.
Although I guess a cynic would say that, like, for example, a goblin's anti-shooting tech is another goblin, and just, one goblin runs forward holding the other goblin in front of him. And when that guy dies, the first one gets into combat. And, that's the oft quoted maxim of, quantity has a quality all its own. And you can, against the list that only have like 1/3 shooting, if you're down at 600 points, 1/3 shooting is probably like no more than a dozen bows, and a dozen bows against 60 goblins is, it's like trying to empty the ocean with a spoon.
Evil, it still doesn't really make us play any different, because like if you're playing evil, unless you're playing Corsairs or Harad, your shooting is generally going to be not just subpar to good, but just subpar. Right. So you really were kind of doing the same thing anyway. Like when I go to just blue on blue, it doesn't matter, tournaments, I'm still playing evil, expecting them to use bodies to handle shots, and then using heroic march, drums, whatever. I think that a lot of evil players kind of go in with that mindset, even if you have not even the higher numbers like Angmar or like, trying to think of anything else that's super, but like Angmar is a great example. It's just like you have troops that are vulnerable to shooting. You don't really have massive numbers because you're often bringing like Gullivar and the Witch King and stuff and Barrow Whites, and so you really just take shots and you just hope that Gullivar is going to make up the difference in his case, or like Sauron in his case, because when you play Sauron, you think you get a horde, but you don't. Like it's a horde, but it's like not that many once you factor in Sauron's point cost, combined with whatever other minor hero you threw in there. So realistically, I don't think good versus evil changes the way they play in response to shooting very much. They kind of already suck at it. So,
well, I get my point, I guess, was this. My point was that it's not that evil doesn't have anti-shooting tech. It's that they have different anti-shooting tech that isn't obviously anti-shooting tech.
Oh, mine was in more response to Andrew rather than you.
Oh, okay.
I agree with what you're saying. They just take shots to the face as they just keep marching forward. Like this kind of.
So there's 3 types of anti-shooting tech that you quote tech that you should be thinking about when you're evil, right? And and this is aside from the Shadow Lord. One of them is numbers that we just talked about. The other of them is armor, because once you can get up to, defense, just giving guys shield and giving them to defense 5 will have the number of casualties you take from most bows. And then the third one is speed, because one thing you do have a lot of on the evil side is access to drums. and you generally will have a bunch of captains that can march. And that's something else to think about when you're kind of building an anti-good evil list is, maybe you drop that 30 points or 20 points if you're an Easterling on the drum, to, make sure you get, that you're going to get like 1 or 2 rounds less of shooting in there.
I'm just saying, I don't know how that would change on blue versus blue or good versus evil. Like, I don't see me with an army of Easterlings thinking, oh, I have a chance of playing half good armies now. I'm going to drop the drum or I'm going to take the drum now. Like, I think I was just going to take it either way. I
guess I'd say this: if I am building a Mordor or an Uruk-hai army, and I know I am just going to be fighting good, I am much more likely to take the drum in either of those 2 armies.
I agree with that. I very much agree with
that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm building an army, if I'm building an army that doesn't have like the Shadow Lord in it or something like that, I may be like, I'm going to throw in an extra captain to march quicker, or I'm going to buy this drum so that I can close quicker.
Okay, so then I guess speed then is one thing we're adding, or some variant of that, or I guess in the sense of anti-shooting, the high defense is, aside from Black Numenorians, fairly non-existent in the evil ranks.
Uruk-hai. I mean,
basically.
are you getting that strength? Are you getting that shield on the?
Unusually enough, most people don't ally in Uruk-hai. I don't know why. It's
just a matter of when you're designing a list.
I think it's a good point though, Devin, because when you think about it, on paper, Uruk-hai are really strong. You would think you'd see a little bit more of them, and with how effective Lurtz is at his points, you would think, oh, I'll just throw Lurtz in with whatever I'm going with, and it's not do pretty well.
Yeah, especially considering like fight 5 is basically the evil standard. 5, 5, 5, 4. I mean defense. Sorry, defense 5, defense 4. So getting to defense 6 is a little bit more rare. Defense 7. Crap, I don't even know if there's any troop types in evil with defense 7. So, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I'm sure there might be one. But so basically, speed, increase your speed is probably the most common. Because honestly, even if you brought Black Numenorians in the front, chances are you're caring more about the terror and the shields.
You could just take Morannons. Like it does the
that's true. Morannons. Yeah. But I mean, so maybe you bulk up instead of on numbers on Morannons. But I mean, honestly, like I said, it's like even in a good versus good or whatever, where you can play the blue on blue tournaments, like Morannons are still just good. Like I would just take them regardless.
Well, I think Matt's making the point.
No, I agree with Matt's point about the speed. That I am slightly more likely to take speed. And in his example of Isengard, I'm like, okay, I do agree with that. So. But because I was thinking Easterlings earlier, and I'm kind of like, well, I'm always bringing a drum in the Easterlings, so I'm like,
Easterlings are always taking a drum because that's like one of the things they do. But
I get your point though, Devin, because I'm always trying to add a drum to Mordor whenever I take Mordor. Like I'm always trying to add a drum, so it doesn't really matter what. But I agree with Matt. If I knew, you're both right. Where it's like if I knew I'm going against good, I'm going to be more likely to take the drum, but I'm always going to try to take the drum anyway. So it's just kind of one of those things. Unless there's
Army of the Dead might be more popular in good versus evil.
So I think Andrew actually had a point he was trying to insert here about 10 minutes ago. Andrew, do you even still remember what it was? But I want to make sure we get it in.
No, I think you guys kind of covered it. I was trying to get to what Devin was saying, which is basically like, if you don't have the Shadow Lord and you're used to playing evil and you're playing kind of lightly armored troops, which is usually what they have, you want to be hyper aggressive, which to your point, Devin, right, is kind of the norm anyway. But I think in good versus evil, you have to have one of those 2 things going for you, right? And the reason why I brought it up is because I'm kind of the evil shooting guy, right? I play Corsairs, I play Serpent Horde. Those are kind of my most popular evil armies. So I've just noticed it's a bit different than just going blue versus blue.
I think I mean, even with Corsairs, I'm trying to think of them, and I'm like, I don't play them any differently, even in the other ones. So it's like, I think honestly, I make more adjustments on the good side than I do the evil side. I think there are a lot more, but I don't know, maybe more shutdown magic on the evil side. So I think you're guaranteed to see Wraiths. I think honestly, when I play good versus evil, I think I'll say that is another. Once again, though, it's a good change that I'm making. So on the good side, I do know I'm dealing with Wraiths almost continuously. So if I do not have something that shuts them down, like Lady of Light, then I'm I don't know, like having to deal with more bodyguard stuff to be able to, or on mounted bodyguards, I can like swoop in and grab them or something like that. But I know that I will definitely be dealing with Wraiths. So
yeah, and that was actually one of the things that I had on my notes as well. Is like on the good side, heroes like Elendil, like Glorfindel, that have the built-in fortify spirit are huge, because you can take those guys and then you don't have to worry about having that mitigation, because you can't get it in every single list, right?
yeah.
So I really like those heroes in good versus evil on the good side. And then just as an army, is it going to completely shut down a Wraith? No, but if you have Lothlorien or Numenor with the bubble of resistant to magic, that can help a lot as well. So I think that's one of the big things that we've all touched on, is that evil's always going to have access to magic when you're playing good versus evil. So I really like those armies. Like, I wouldn't consider Numenor a top tier army, but when your whole army is resistant to magic and you can stop, sorcerer's blasts from getting into your big heroes that are on horses, like stuff like that. Elendil's got his fortify spirit. That makes a big difference. So I think it elevates, certain armies as well on the good side.
Okay. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. As always, post any lists you'd like for us to review as well in the comments. We are on Facebook as well. If you're looking to look into our group, we post our episodes there, as well as sometimes we'll post new updates on what we have going on. As well, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you're looking to listen to us there. And don't forget to give Andrew and his podcast a shout. We look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Bye.